That is the New York Giants. I feel like we spent a good amount of time on them. Now we can move on to the team that John probably is dying to talk about. I don't know, but I'll be real quick. The Dallas Cowboys, they're on Hard Knocks. And so I'm gonna go over some of their. I'm gonna go with the losses first. Shawn Lee, I believe he retired, correct?
Yep.
Lost to center Joe Looney. Alden Smith also left. I don't think he had much of an impact. Chidobe Awuzie, cornerback, also left as well. I'm trying to see if I'm missing anybody else important. John, is anyone off the top of your head? Say Xavier
I mean,
Woods.
Andy Dalton left.
Oh, Andy Dalton. Why
But
is he not? Sorry, he's right there. I'm just. See, this is why I should make a spreadsheet. That's my fault.
you're good.
But yeah, this is once again, this is all via overthecap.com. So addition wise though, John mentioned, I think we mentioned before, Cowboys offensive line isn't as great right now as it used to be. Brought in tackle Ty Nsekhe from the Bills, who I thought was solid. Brought in a couple of safeties and Malik Hooker and Keanu Neal because they did bring in Dan Quinn to run the defense. Let's see, that was a long snapper. Just making sure.
Also added safety Demonte Casey,
He's on the
former
bottom
Falcon
list
as well.
Not really much else. I know y'all were strapped for cash anyway because you had to re-sign Dak. And then draft-wise, though, really hit it out of the park. And excuse that ad that just played if you heard that. Blame ProFootballTalk.com. First round, I picked 12. Got Micah Parsons out of Penn State. He's already looked really good in the preseason. Looking like he's going to be a great pick regardless. Got a guy in the second round, Kelvin Joseph, a cornerback out of Kentucky. Guy I didn't do much homework on, but maybe I think he's more of a. I'm assuming he's a kind of a scheme fit for Dallas for that Seattle scheme that they're going to be running, the cover three. And they got a few other guys, a few other people, but I liked also fourth round Jabril Cox, a linebacker at LSU, a good solid, kind of take a chance on him. I'm not sure why. I thought he was around third round for me. So especially if I forget his name, Jalen Smith is still not very good. He can be the rotational guy if necessary, I feel, but I'm not sure how Dallas feels about that. But I'll stop. I'm forgetting the word. Filibustering. John, how do you feel about your Cowboys offseason and how it will affect this season?
I mean, obviously, there was a lot of high expectations last year that a lot of people, myself included, put on the Cowboys, and they did not live up to them for a variety of reasons. But I think the main thing that really stood out, because the offense, you can make the excuse that okay, they had a lot of injuries, and I think it's a valid one because when a lot of your top guys are hurt, it's just hard to perform. But on defense, they were just bad. Like they were just flat out bad. I know DeMarcus Lawrence missed a few games, but like for the most part, they just sucked. And so that has brought about a big offseason of change. And one thing that I've heard so far about the Cowboys defense is a lot of people are sort of negative on them going into this year. It's like, well, they're just the same old defense. And whether they improve or not, that's just factually wrong because the defense is so different just personnel wise. I think like half of the defense has been overhauled. And once you start including backups and all that kind of stuff, their entire draft, I think, except for offensive tackle Josh Ball in the 5th round, and then wide receivers Semi Fehoko in the 6th or 7th round. I think those are the only two offensive players, 5th round as well. And so those are the only two offensive players. Everybody else, and I think there was like 7 picks besides those guys, were defense. And so they went and they addressed defense pretty heavily. And I think the biggest move that I was excited about was actually bringing in defensive coordinator Dan Quinn. We had our most successful defensive seasons over the last decade in the Seattle scheme with former Seattle DBs coach Chris Richard calling our defensive plays. And so I think Dan Quinn, he can bring back some of those schemes that made us successful because last season we tried to completely stray away from that with defensive coordinator Mike Nolan. And I'm just glad that they fired him because his track record even before Dallas was never good when it came to defenses. And so at least we're getting Dan Quinn, who has some incredibly successful defenses under his belt previously. Now I'm not going to assume that this defense can make that sort of jump, but I think the goal right now for this defense is just to be mediocre. And I think it's within the realm of possibilities, but it's still going to be tough to do just because they were so bad last year. The notable position battles that I've heard about in training camp are, first off, corner. Kelvin Joseph was an interesting pick. Not that he was a bad one. I think that there was guys that they wanted that were picked ahead of them. Trevon Moehrig is the name that really stands out to me, the safety out of TCU. Apparently they were really high on him, and he got picked by the Raiders. And I think there was another corner that also got picked like early. Tyson Campbell got picked early in the second round. I hadn't really heard if the Cowboys were high on him, but I mean, I assume that he was somewhere on their draft board in that second round slot because they needed a corner. And so once those two guys went off the board, I think they just went with the most talented guy that they saw. And Kelvin Joseph was a guy who formerly was at LSU. I think he got kicked off the team for disciplinary reasons, transferred to Kentucky, got things under control, had some successful seasons. And I don't know. Basically, I just think he was, one of those guys who I think has a lot of high talent. He reminds me of Randy Gregory when they picked him, a guy who they thought could have gone higher if he, didn't have the issues he had in college. So I think they were going for the most talented spot. I don't feel like it was schemed though, because the thing that I noticed later in the draft is that Dan Quinn went for long, lanky defensive backs with Nashawn Wright and Israel Mukomaku, I think is how you pronounce his name. Those two guys are both like 6'3", 6'4" defensive backs, and they're very long wingspans, all that kind of stuff. And if you look at Dan Quinn's former defenses, Richard Sherman, 6'3", Brandon Browner, 6'4", like that's the stereotypical corner that he sort of wants. Kelvin Joseph's like 5'10", 5'11". So I don't know. I don't know what the mindset was behind picking him, but I don't think it was a bad pick. So far, I haven't heard that he's going to win the starting job in training camp, but he's a second round pick rookie. Not all of them can do that. So anyway, that's what I've heard out of corner. And then the other big major spot on defense would be the linebacker spot. And I know that casual or just fans of the NFL who don't really care that much about the Cowboys are sort of really high on Jalen Smith, but I think that's just because he puts up a lot of tackles and he's really good at getting tackles. But if you're a Cowboys fan, you know that his tackles are like 12 yards downfield after a big play that shouldn't have happened if he played it correctly. And maybe you can blame it on the scheme, but I'm just really concerned that the injury he had in college is starting to limit his mobility later in his career, because I think one of his shining assets was his speed. And so, honestly, I thought the Cowboys were going to cut him this offseason, and they can't now because once I think it was after June, they didn't cut him. They fully guaranteed his contract for the season. So they're going to play it out with him on the team this year. But all I'm saying is if you watch the Cowboys and you're shocked that Jalen Smith is not playing a lot, that's why. But everything I've heard in training camp is so incredibly positive on Micah Parsons and Jabril Cox and Keanu Neal. Keanu Neal is played safety before, but he's playing linebacker for the Cowboys. I don't think he's played a single snap at safety in any of training camp or preseason so far. It's just been purely linebacker. I'm sure maybe if injuries happen, he would, potentially have to move back to safety, but right now it's just all linebacker. And the big reason that they wanted him to do that is because Leighton Van Der Resch is okay at it, but Jalen Smith sucks at it, and that is coverage from the linebacker spot. Keanu Neal being a bigger safety, he played coverage a lot, and he's significantly, good at it compared to most linebackers in the league. So I've heard nothing but good things about him there, and I think he's going to have a really large role on third down specifically. Micah Parsons, I think he's like the highest graded run defender in preseason so far, and he hasn't played a ton, so it's a small sample size, but our run defense was terrible. Look back at the Browns game last year, and you can see that Micah Parsons is going to have a massive role for this team. I think that he's going to be on the field a lot, and I think they're going to move him around at different spots. I've heard that they might play him a little bit as a pass rusher sometimes, sort of like Bruce Irvin was for the Seattle Seahawks during their runs. But also I expect him to play a ton of linebacker because he's just really good at football. Leighton Van Der Resch, I think, has had a quietly strong camp. The biggest issue for him has just always been injuries. And so he's healthy right now. And if he can be healthy, I think that's a solid addition, for the team to him, just being back. So yeah, overall, I think they should improve is basically what I'm saying, just because they have so many different faces on defense. I think another name that's sort of going under the radar right now because he's hurt is Neville Gallimore. I know you were pretty high on him last year in the draft. I was pretty high on him. I've heard really good things out of him in training camp. He's supposed to be a starter this year. He did get hurt, and I think he's going to miss a few games, but he should be back. At most, I think he's going to miss 4. But he should be back. And I think that him and Tristan Hill, when they both come back at defensive tackles, could be some big, much needed additions for the defensive line that we need. So that's the defense. Offense, I'm just going to keep it real short. CeeDee Lamb's a baller. Draft him in your fantasy leagues. He's going to go off, but don't ignore Amari Cooper. He's going to go off too. This offense, I mean, they have the talent to be a top 5 offense in the league. They have no excuse to not be one. And I expect everybody to rebound from last year because I think last year overall was just a bad offensive year. And I think everyone should improve this year with Dak being healthy, the offensive line being healthy. But the one issue, like I mentioned earlier, was turnovers. They have to clean that up. I'm hoping the coaching staff is emphasizing that and not ignoring that because of just how bad the overall team was last year. Because although they were the number 1 offense, I think through like 4 games last year before Dak got hurt, they also led the league in turnovers. So that's my thing on the Cowboys. My expectations are if their defense can be mediocre and their offense lives up to expectations, I think they should win this division. If that's the case, obviously the questions remain, can those things happen? Can they be healthy on offense? Can the defense improve? We'll see. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just kind of a wait and see thing with the Cowboys because they have the potential to win the division and be a playoff team. But if things don't pan out, they could also be bad.
Yeah. So, I'm with you with most, especially the offense. I expect turnovers. Also, the fact that Dak will be back. I think the turnovers will trim down. So that'll help trim it down just naturally. Yeah, I'm glad that I didn't know Neville was basically a starter, so I'm glad that that he did. And honestly, this scheme fits Neville Gallimore better than what y'all were trying to run last year, which I am with you. I mean, there's just I don't know who to blame on that. I don't know if that's Mike McCarthy, but just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Like that defense was literally drafted to run a 4-3 Seattle scheme, and you try to make it something it's not. That's why it didn't work there.
For the record, I blame Mike McCarthy for hiring his buddy Mike Nolan, and then I blame Mike Nolan for instituting that defense, and I blame Jerry Jones for allowing Mike McCarthy to hire his friend who has a track record of crappy defenses. Because if you look at the defenses he's had, his last defensive coordinator gig, he had like 3 straight seasons on the Falcons with a bottom 5 defense. I don't understand how they hired him.
Yeah. Sorry, what was I? Oh, and then so I do like the linebackers. I didn't know Keanu Neal was playing linebacker, and the only worry about that is he has had injury issues. And when it comes to the run game, like if he's at linebacker, I mean, he's gonna be more in the box, I assume.
Which, like I said, I think it's mainly a 3rd down role. Okay. I don't know how they'll mix them in, but because they do have Micah Parsons, Van Der Resch, Jalen Smith. I think the goal is to pull off Jalen Smith on 3rd downs, put in Keanu Neal, and if he does get hurt, I mean, I think Jabril Cox and his coverage ability can, fill that void. But I hear what you're saying because he's had bad injuries.
Yeah, and maybe I forgot his name. What was it? Kelvin Johnson, right? I almost said Kevin.
Yeah, Kelvin Joseph.
Joseph. Sorry, I'm mixing up him in the Giants cornerback.
Yeah,
but maybe you went and got that guy instead of the typical tall lanky receiver for the Seattle scheme because. The Seattle scheme, I feel like just as a whole, it's starting to die out because teams are starting to figure it out as a whole. Now, granted, Gus Bradley, some of the better teams that run the Seattle scheme, I'm trying to think of the other one, but Gus Bradley, I know, they still mix it up. They don't just sit in, the same 2 or 3 defenses. So hopefully Dan Quinn can see that from his counterparts that he worked with and say, okay, I need to incorporate that in my offense because, yeah, especially if Kelvin's not starting. If it's, I did like Trevon Diggs last year, but still.
Just from what I've heard for the cornerback depth, by the way, it's Trevon Diggs, Anthony Brown on the outside, and then Jordan Lewis in the slot spot.
Okay.
Kelvin Joseph and Nashawn Wright as the backups to the outside, and then Maurice Kennedy is their slot backup.
So cornerbacks aren't as bad as I thought. I was gonna say I was like more of their cornerbacks, but I forgot you had Anthony Brown and Jordan Lewis, who are both solid, more twitchier guys. So it could potentially be that. But yeah, like I think we kind of alluded to, health is a huge concern because also, Malik Hooker's back at safety and he's had injury issues. But if he's healthy, he can be a solid, play the Earl Thomas role solidly. Obviously not to the level Earl Thomas did, but he can be that type of. He can just execute it well. I am worried. The only thing I'm worried about too, I forgot to mention for your offense. This will be my last point, is offensive line. Zach Martin's still good, but Tyron Smith's been. I don't know how he is health wise, but last year I feel like not even last year, but for the last 2 years he's kind of been dealing with stuff.
I mean, at this point, you just chalk it up that he's going to miss at least 3 games because I think it's happened the last handful of years, not even just the last 2.
Especially with the 17-game season. And then, so hopefully we'll see. Maybe maybe the line just got better overall. I think that was your center. I'm guessing Biotish
is how it's pronounced. It's kind of hard. Yeah, so he's a starting center.
Okay, so so hopefully he's progressed. But yeah, I'm a little bit with you. I regardless, even if that all clicks, I don't think that they'll win the division as long as Washington's relevant. Just because it's, I just against Washington, I feel like their defense will be able to slow you down enough where their offense can do a little bit. But regardless, I think it's very close between you and the Giants. But I know you're better than the Eagles. I'm not sure what your schedule looks like, but I expect Cowboys to be a wild card-ish team. I'm not sure if I'll have them making the playoffs, but just saying in realistic terms, would not shock me if in the season if they're in that hunt. And honestly, before we get to the Eagles, so I expect this division just to be better as a whole. I think last year too, they just have a similar style of play. A lot of these, like we just mentioned with Washington and the Giants, 2 very defensive teams. They're going to win ugly games, not rely on their offensive line. And then, the Eagles, the Eagles still have a solid offensive line. We'll get to them in a second. But because sometimes you have to play to your division. And I think that's just what happens in NFC East. And everyone just thinks that, they're all sucky or it's boring football. But they're just a little more old school, or, except for the Cowboys maybe in recent years. But even before that, we're going to build through the trenches and then figure it out from there. So, but that is the Dallas Cowboys. And we'll see if they can stay healthy. And if hopefully, I think I did see just a few minutes ago that Dak is expected to be full go for week 1. So,
yeah, in training camp he's been fully cleared to start throwing